This must be the newest trend in the neighborhood, huh? Curbside dining there. And a very good morning to you. Happy Saturday, the 29th of August, 2020. Hope your Saturday is off to a good start. I got a lot of great feedback yesterday on discussing the Chris Watts case 2 years on, and the beauty of time is that it gives us perspective on a case. When over time more information will come in, more relatives are interviewed, co-workers come into the picture, distant family members, and you get more and more information about the unfortunate victims, and you get more information about the perpetrator of the crime, in this case the capital crime of murder by Chris Watts. And overnight I got a really interesting, a thought-provoking question, which I thought was great. And as you know, early on, the second day of being questioned by the FBI, the two FBI agents, the woman and the man, Chris Watts had confessed with his father there that he had done the crime, and almost immediately the local police department for Frederick came in and arrested him, and that was it. So any further questioning, and the officers even said later, well, we wish that we had more time to ask more questions, but as soon as the crime is admitted to, the local police are going to come in, they're going to arrest you, and the rest is history. Now, the great question that was asked yesterday is, what if Chris Watts had not confessed? What if he had just kept his mouth shut and not said anything? And I think it's a very interesting, we can speculate on what might have happened and what the path of prosecution might have looked like. And it would have been a much more arduous path to go down, because when you're talking about a capital crime, when you could potentially have the death penalty hanging over your head, the taking of another life, besides the ones that were sadly lost in the commission of murders, is something that the preponderance of evidence, the weight of evidence, says it has to be beyond a shadow of a doubt. There can't be anything that gives doubt in a jury's mind that yes, this person is guilty. And absent Chris Watts' confession, it becomes a harder road for the prosecution to make the case that he was the one that murdered him. You have to understand, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV, but I did have as a goal one time to be a lawyer in college, and I avidly took pre-law courses in philosophy of law and other things, but it's nowhere near being legal training. But it gave you a basis in the differences between the way justice is prosecuted, say, in the Western world, the United States, Canada, England, places like that. You have certain rights that are enshrined in constitutions or charters. But having spent 5 years in China, I can tell you that the pursuit of justice is very different over there. Somebody gets killed, the local police go out and investigate, look into the facts of the matter. They call a suspect in, they question them, they do a little field work, they get a person in, they question them, and there's no limits on what they can do to that person. They can literally beat that person within an inch of his or her life to get them to confess. Now, maybe or maybe not they did the crime, but the goal of the government is not necessarily to have 100% the correct person. The goal of the government is to have whoever they have their chief suspect, and they will have some evidence or some thought, even circumstantial maybe, that this person did it, but they will have that person, after probably repeatedly being beaten or starved or food or water withheld, that person will eventually sign a confession, and the government considers, well, we did the job, we got the person to admit to it. And then the person's whisked off, they get a bullet put in their head, and then the family, the surviving family of that person gets a bill for the cost of the bullet and the trial. In the American and a lot of the Western system, it's a much different story. The government, whatever it is, whatever court system, police, everything, they have to prove beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt that you're the one that committed this crime. If Chris Watts, now why did Chris Watts confess? Because he probably had the thought in his mind, and they told him, hey, you can have a lawyer, you can have one appointed for you. And I think he probably thought to himself, well, number one, I can probably just talk my way out of this because I'm a smooth operator. That's my whole life. I can suss my way through this and be out of here in a day or two and be up to Aspen with my girlfriend and enjoying the weekend. Number two, there's no doubt that the thought crossed his mind, if it comes out in the news, which it will, that I refuse to talk or answer questions on the grounds that it may incriminate me, it's going to make me look really bad in the court of public opinion. So at that point in time, Chris Watts threw away his rights because he cared more about the court of public opinion than he did about the court of law. This is why legal authorities always tell you, don't answer questions. Make sure you talk to a lawyer first. Tell them you're not going to answer questions. It's just being smart, right? Because a defense attorney, an appointed court prosecutor, their job is to make sure that the case is performed and executed perfectly legally. So when they get to the court, there's no thought of throwing out the case because the evidence was tainted, or you obtained an illegal confession from this person. The stuff is inadmissible, and suddenly the whole case gets tossed out of court. Okay, so these defense attorneys, these court-appointed public defenders, their job is to make sure that the forces of justice stay within the playing field. Okay, they're like the little flippers on a pinball machine, and they keep the ball from going off of the playing field by limiting what the prosecution can and cannot do. Okay, that's their whole job, is to make sure that you have an equivalent or the best defense possible against this prosecution. Okay, but when Chris Watts waived those rights, the police must have thought at that time, the investigating, the questioning officials there, the FBI must have thought that this is great. So their whole goal at that point in time became to win his confidence and to keep him talking as long as possible without having him ever think, gee, maybe I need a lawyer at this point in time. So what did they get out of him? By playing good cop, bad cop, and they got a lie detector test. No lawyer would have advised a client to take a lie detector test. Number two, they eventually got permission to search his phone, and therein was exposed the whole affair he was having with Nicole Kessinger. And they didn't have to go to court. They didn't have to file special papers for a subpoena. They immediately got that information, And as the second day of questioning came by and the cops really drilled down on Chris Watts, he finally broke and confessed that he had murdered them. But what if he had never talked? What if he had clammed up? What if a lawyer said you have the right to, under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, against self-incrimination? No matter what the public might think, you got to understand that you're a prime suspect, so you need to defend yourself. Well, they wouldn't have gotten the confession. They would not have gotten almost immediate access to the phone records. And they would not have had a polygraph test, which he failed miserably. So in that case, the prosecution is left with the problem of how are we going to put this case together? The one thing that, and they wouldn't have given up. They, okay, go, you can go on your way. Remember, he wasn't arrested. So nobody said to him, you have the right to remain silent. He just came in as a potential person to ask questions to, and that was very smart. And he was very forthcoming with either his narcissism or his stupidity, or I would hope a guilty conscience. But if he had never talked, they would have been left with subpoenaing records for phone records. But what eventually would get him was, and this is the thing that the prosecution would have, they would continue the search for the bodies, and almost inevitably they would end up at the Serby 39 or whatever the site was that he disposed of the bodies. And at that point in time, they would have been able to say to any reasonable jury, what would be the odds that a random person would kidnap and murder his family and then spirit them away and bury them here at the same exact site that the husband worked as a pump technician out here for Anadarko Petroleum. A reasonable jury would have probably concluded at that point in time that that's beyond a reasonable doubt. It's unreasonable to think that some random person would have committed this crime, and that would have eventually tied him. And I'm quite sure they would have found those bodies by widening the search to where he worked and things like that. Would he have ended up with the same? You know, it's hard to say. It's hard to say what juries do. It's hard to say what judges do. But there is a big difference between admitting to a crime and then being prosecuted for it without admitting it. So the judge was free to give the maximum sentence. In that case, spare the death penalty. But for sure, you know, well, not for sure, but we will never really know what it would have been on the other way if it was circumstantial evidence. So, okay, you do have the right to remain silent, but eventually it all catches up with you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Your comments are appreciated. Thumbs up are appreciated. And enjoy the rest of your Saturday.